Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
I live on a white cloud, high above the world, and all the gods are nice to me. Cops all call me sir. I live on a white cloud, don't worry about tomorrow. If someone else's kid gets killed, it's someone else's sorrow.
Welcome back. This is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, and today with us from Toronto area, we have well-known Canadian folk singer, songwriter, performer, pilot, TV star, author, Murray McLauchlan. So welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, sir.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I'm living proof that, when you live in Canada, you better have more than one job.
That's right. But right now, on the immediate side of things, you do have a couple of new tunes out. We'll get to those. Tell us a little bit about the first one, White Cloud. Should never have gone this way. Don't blame me. It was my ancestors, but they didn't know any better. Tell us a bit about that song, about living on a white cloud.
Well, like a lot of people all over the world, I think that we were all just shocked and horrified when George Floyd was killed on live television, basically, and a wave of revulsion swept the world in respect to systemic racism, which we all kind of have ignored mostly, and I kind of had to look way down deep inside myself and take a kind of unflinching look at what was there. And I started to remember, years ago, a black friend of mine I was on a board with, who, for the first time, used the expression DWB. And I said, "What the heck is that?" And he said, "Well, driving while black." And I said, what are you talking about? He said, "Well, I'm a reasonably successful black man, and I drive a really nice car, and 3 times a week I get stopped by the police, and it's not a very pleasant experience." And he described it to me. And I had I had never really thought about it before. And then, I also thought about the experiences of, the best man at my wedding was born in Karachi, Pakistan. There's friends of mine who are, First Nations people, and I kind of realized that it's a different world. It's a world that is that lives quite apart from the one in which I live. And even though I'm from modest roots in a working class family, and I'm not exactly what you could call the top of the heap, I think when I looked at it really hard, I realized that aspects of my life have been a lot easier because I'm a white man. A lot of times if I get stopped when I'm driving, I get let off with a warning. I don't get pulled out of the car and spread on the hood.
Right.
That's a very poor example, but I think one of the most interesting illuminations for me when I first was recording this song, I had a fellow named Mark Lestraco who was shooting the video for it in the studio as we recorded the song. And he said that he was really, really deeply involved in working with this song because his son, he's a white man. His son is black. And for the first time, very recently, he'd had to have, what they call in quotes, the talk with his son. And he said the song just tore him up. So I wanted to put that song out early, before there was any album. I felt it was important to get it out early because I thought that it needed to be heard, and it raised some things that I thought needed to be discussed and thought about.
And the other side is 1% on the outside of the fence looking in. And that'd be like 99% of us. So what are we looking at, and why do we care what's on the other side?
Well, you probably would remember this. Many people do, but some years ago there was an event that happened called Occupy Wall Street. A bunch of people showed up and just kind of camped out on Wall Street, and they got kind of roundly dismissed, and a lot of derisive comments were made about them, even in mainstream media, like, oh, these people, what, they don't have a spokesperson, or what are they really taught? Why are they there? Nobody seems to be articulating any case about why they should be there. I kind of looked at what was going on, and I went, I think I know why they're there. And it was the first kind of inkling of people whose lives had been affected by globalization and the concentration of wealth, and who felt like that they were being left behind, and were looking at the prospect of their children's lives maybe not even being as good as theirs, and they were genuinely frightened of the future, and so they're both frightened and angry. And I think as we've watched the results of the way the world goes, more and more and more wealth has been concentrated among fewer and fewer and fewer people, and more people's lives are becoming poorer and more difficult. And of course, in vast parts of the world, life is almost impossible. And it's always been my feeling. I mean, I'm a bit of a history nut, and I actually met John Kenneth Galbraith. For those of you who don't know him, I mean, he's a very famous Canadian economist who's basically the guy who talked Franklin Delano Roosevelt into creating the New Deal, because they felt that if they did not do that, they were going to have a revolution on their hands.
Exactly.
And I do believe that if we do not find a way to resolve some of these issues, that the world is going to become a very difficult and dangerous place.
And Murray McLauchlan is with us. His words come out in songs, and we have those here on our podcast. Murray McLauchlan, based in the Ontario-Toronto area. On a bit more, not a happier note, but what has 2020 been like for you? What with the pandemic and shutdowns and things like that? Must have cut into your income a little bit.
I was fortunate enough to get a concert tour, a theater tour, finished just at the end of February before things totally locked down. But there were other touring activities in the fall, in October and November, that were completely shut down because all the theaters closed. So I lost 27 shows. I think where the effect is, like from my perspective, the tour company, the tour promotion company that I work with, they're completely dependent on theatrical presentations of various kinds to make their living, and that's just shut down. All the tech people that have jobs that depend on that, I mean, they're all shut down. It's a vast kind of domino effect. I mean, when I go out and tour, I mean, yeah, I play a show. I also employ the people who work in the theater, and I also employ the transportation people and the airplane ticket people, and and the restaurant people, and
right.
And the musicians I work with. Like, there's a whole trickle down effect, like an economic effect, and it's, you stop the one thing, you stop a lot of things. So my personal hardship in terms of what's happened with the pandemic has been not nearly as bad as some people's, but what I've tried to do in reaction to it is, first of all, to concentrate really hard on what my core business has always been, which I'm a songwriter, and that's my art. So I've been very, very concentrated and very busy, and that's how some of these songs have come out. I kind of isolated myself and started looking deep in my heart, and there's a lot of songs that have come out, and these two are an example of that. I've also brought projects forward that might have been a little bit delayed into next year because I wanted to keep the musicians and friends of mine who operate recording studios and such working. So, I've been trying to do what I can to put money in people's pockets as well as keeping myself occupied.
Exactly, and not to drop names or anything, but I will. I did an interview with David Clayton Thomas a while back, and he said pretty much the same thing. He woke up one morning and $500,000 worth of bookings had gone down the drain overnight because of this thing. So,
yeah, I mean it's universal. It hurts everybody, and I think the greatest difficulty that I sense. Certainly people like David or people like me will be impacted, but there's a lot of, just in Toronto, for instance, there's a lot of small music places, bars and music venues, they're shut down. And those places are much more vulnerable. And the people that are coming up, that are starting out or depending on those places to get heard, have no place to work. And the income for a lot of those artists is really, really, it was very marginal at the best of times, and I honestly don't know whether or not that can recover.
It is going to be an interesting voyage to see how we recover, because, just because there's a vaccination or whatever doesn't mean we all wake up the next day and everything's back to normal and the bars are wide open and airplanes are full and hotels have to turn you away, and nobody realizes...
Well, I really genuinely hope that I don't think the return to normal is ever going to be something that we can do. I mean, the world has changed, and people do use the word reset. I don't really know about that, but I do know this, that I think when things have returned to some semblance of normalcy, that we're going to realize how much more important our dependencies on each other are.
Exactly. And Murray McLauchlan is with us. Apparently you came to Canada, you and your family, when you were 5 years old. Was that much of an adjustment for you on that move?
When you're that young, everything's just a big adventure. I came over, my father, of course, and my oldest brother came over in advance to kind of establish a beachhead. So I came over with my mom and the rest of the family on a dinky little ocean liner, Cunard liner called the Samaria. And intriguingly enough, Pete Mansbridge came over on the same boat, but he was up in first class with his mom.
Oh, he was in first class.
We were riding the drive shaft.
Interesting. And then,
so yeah, I remember a lot of things about that trip. Most notably, we did about 5 or 6 days through a North Atlantic gale, and pretty well the whole ship was sick except me. So it was colorful and smelly
at the same time. So yeah. you went from crossing Atlantic in a ship to becoming a licensed pilot. When did you become the actual licensed commercial pilot?
Well, at the minute I had a nickel's worth of disposable income, I wanted to go and take flying lessons. And of course that was probably about 1972, I think, 73. Growing up, UK, that had a tremendous influence on me, like a lot of other British-born kids. Our heroes were pilots. We were very, very conscious of the reason that we didn't, wind up growing up saying Sieg Heil was because of Spitfire pilots and Mosquito pilots and Lancaster pilots. So they were our heroes, and I loved airplanes. When we first moved to Canada, our first house was up in North Toronto. It wasn't far from the Downsview Air Base. So the background noise of my childhood was those old yellow Harvard trainers, like bumblebees flying around, because they trained pilots there.
Right.
And I would ride up on my bicycle to the airfield, and I'd watch F-86 Sabre jets and CF-100s come in over the fence. So I watched the arrow fly from my schoolyard. So the airplanes were a big part of my consciousness. And I wanted to learn how to fly. So the first opportunity that I had, I went and I began to take flying lessons. And of course, the government of Canada had a program at that time, because they'd been caught so short during the war with a shortage of licensed aviation personnel. They'd ramped up the United Empire flight training program pretty quickly. But in the aftermath of the war, they wanted to make sure there was a pool of civilian pilots. So they gave you 100% tax write-off if you took flying lessons for your ground school, for your dual time, for your solo time, for the whole works. So it actually made a lot of sense. And I stayed. I got my private license, then I got my commercial license, then I got my float plane rating, then I got my multi-engine rating, then I got my instrument rating. And thank you very much, Government of Canada.
Yeah. See, tax breaks work.
Well, I can't say that I was ready to go to war immediately, but, I guess if I'd have got called for some kind of service to my country, I would have been qualified to do it.
You're well known for flying your Cessna 185 float plane up and around. Do you still have that plane?
No, I do not. That was an airplane that I leased in order to do the flight around Canada, to circumnavigate Canada for that television show. That airplane ended up, sadly, it got repainted in more of a lands and forests paint scheme, and became the property of a man who was doing log surveys. During the turn of last century, like way back when, 120 odd years ago, when the areas around Ontario were being clear cut for the big white pines, a lot of the logs they were driving down through the lake systems and river systems, a lot of them sunk, and those big 100-foot logs are still down there. So this fella who got the airplane was surveying to see whether or not he could start a company that could reclaim those logs, because they're valuable.
Sort of like relic on the beachcombers.
Yeah, unfortunately, he was disappointed because the logs were deemed to be a habitat for fish and for breeding fish and that sort of thing. And I think you can't pull them up.
Nope, I guess not. That's it. Murray McLauchlan.
So he got a really nice airplane for not much.
Murray McLauchlan is with us, singer-songwriter. You remember the first guitar you ever had?
The first guitar I ever played actually belonged to my brother. It was a K guitar. The first one I ever owned, I don't actually remember what it was, but I remember the first really good one I got. It was a thing called an Echo, E-K-O, had an adjustable bridge. And my school chums kind of got together and took up a fund because my first guitar got broken by a guy who fell on it at a party. And I had a gig, so I didn't have a guitar to go and do the gig, so I borrowed one, and then they took up a collection, got me a guitar.
Well,
it was kind of cool.
How about your first paying gig? What was that?
Easy peasy. My first paying gig was at a club just between Yorkville Avenue and Hazelton Avenue in a laneway. It was called La Rive Gauche.
The left bank.
The left bank, because nobody was sure, I guess, if you could speak French, so they translated it on the marquee. I think I got. I think I was paid the princely sum of $25 for 2 nights.
Well, that's pretty good back then. Why not, hey?
Well, I was an art student, and it bought some paint anyway.
So back to airplane flying, it seems like a lot of you musician types. Ed Robertson has a plane. There was a TV show I interviewed Wayne Rostad years ago, who flew around in a plane. So what is it? Once you start playing music, you want to fly above the clouds?
I don't think Ed actually flies anymore. I think he gave it up. He got himself a Cessna 206 on floats. I think it was a 206. And had an incident with it up in the lake where his cottage was, and it went into the trees. Fortunately, no one got killed, but I think he didn't. I think that was it for Ed. in his flying career. Tom Cochrane also went that route. He bought himself a 185 on floats, and had an accident with it on floats, and then had another accident with it on wheels. So he wisely gave up being an aviator.
Yes.
Wayne Rostad, on the other hand, he turned it into a television series, I think, and he flew all over the place all the time with it.
Yeah, that was a good show. I like that show. How about your favorite song you've ever written? Is there a favorite? Are they all like your children? You can't really name a favorite one?
You're right about that. It is like if you pick a favorite child, the rest of them get mad at you.
Right.
But generally speaking, the ones I'm most interested in are the ones that I've most recently created. But I think I recognize that there are standouts where, for various reasons, either people really love them for good reasons, or because even over time, I feel like I got it right. And certainly, one of the first songs I ever wrote was a song called Child Song. And that was the first song that it was ever recorded of mine by a major artist, an American singer named Tom Rush. And that was actually recently featured in a hit television show called This Is Us on NBC television.
Oh, my wife watches that. Yes.
Yep. So it's still out there. People still love that song, and I still love it too, because it was, it was true. It hit the truth. Certainly Sweeping the Spotlight Away, which is not too many people might know about that song, but it's a really quite beautiful song that uses the image of Emmett Kelly, the circus clown. Those ones kind of stand out for me. And of course, Farmer Song stands out for me because, first of all, it was so mammothly, monstrously, hugely successful, and so surprisingly successful, until I realized that all it says is thank you.
Right.
And people like that message.
I like the song because it reminds me of, I don't know, is that based on a true incident? You were hitchhiking around, or...
I wrote the song in a hotel room in New York City while I was actually recording the album that it's on.
Oh.
Believe it or not.
Yeah. Well, our family farm is down the highway here, Highway 16, between Saskatoon and North Battleford, and I could just imagine somebody such as yourself thumbing a ride and stopping in where my grandparents and uncle and aunt were, and the same old thing, a farmer guy with his dirty hat and dirty clothes and stuff like that.
I had, of course, as people know, I had spent quite a good deal of time before I was in New York making a record, riding freight trains and being homeless and traveling across Canada, basically like a migrant worker, more or less. So I was pretty familiar with the territory you're talking about. I'd slept in a lot of farm machinery and ridden in a lot of flatbed cars. So the images that were in that song were certainly in my head. And, even if you're locked up in a jail, your mind can soar free. So, living in New York while I was making that record, I felt so far away from that world that I think my brain wanted to travel back there a little bit. And I think that's partly why I wrote this song.
You've also had, a while back, bypass surgery. Did that work out okay?
Yeah, it was kind of a shock. I was a very healthy person. I was doing, I had been involved in martial arts for quite a long time. And in order to pass my aviation medical, there was a little bit of an anomaly on the ECG. So I had to have a test, otherwise the Ministry of Transport would deem it that I couldn't drop a Cessna on somebody's head anymore. So I went down and I had this test. It was an invasive test called an angiogram,
right,
to determine whether or not I had a problem. And they screwed it up and they tore my coronary artery.
Oh, jeez.
So basically, they came within a few minutes, I think, of killing me. And then I had to have an emergency surgery to repair that. And while they had me open to do the emergency surgery to repair the damage that they'd done, the surgeon said, well, like most 50-year-olds, there are deposits, there's some coronary artery disease there, so we might as well put some grafts in, and if he needs them, then great. If he doesn't need them, they'll dry up and blow away. But it's kind of preemptive. So that's why I had the bypass surgery. It was an adjunct to them actually repairing the damage that the doctors had done themselves
in the first place. Oh boy! So
yep.
All fully recovered and everything. I assume that was years ago. So.
Oh yeah, it was 21 years ago. So
right.
I've been fit as a fiddle ever since.
Good. Lunch at Allen's.
Actually, I went back to by 6 months after that, I was back full bore doing martial arts again. So no problem.
No problem. Lunch at Allen's. Are there any more of those planned? I guess not. Hey.
Well, some of the shows that were canceled for this fall that we've just gone through, some of the November shows, about 10 of them were concerts in the big theaters in Eastern Canada for Lunch at Allen's. So Lunch at Allen's is, of course, on hold right now. Cindy Church, of course, lives in Halifax. They're having the Atlantic bubble. Nobody's going in or out of there. All the theaters are still closed. We shall see. I mean, we have rebooked the Lunch at Allen's shows for the fall of 21 out there. We'll have to see how it goes, whether the vaccines are effective enough to open things up or not. I have no idea, just like most of the planet.
No idea. No, we don't have one either. How about you? You're active, involved in charity regarding palliative care. How'd that come about? I've just actually done my 2 terms, but I have for 6 years been on the board of an organization called Room 217 Foundation. And what we're involved in is using music, training music therapists, training medical personnel and caregivers to use music to alleviate suffering in palliative and end-of-life situations on the one hand, and also in the for dementia care, for Alzheimer's and dementia care. We were very much involved in that, and for 6 years I put together a big show at the Glen Gould Theatre here in Toronto to raise money for that cause, and we had a lot of wonderful folks come and play. Margaret Atwood actually sang, and Jan Arden joined us. Basically a really wonderful cast of folks came along to help. Murray McLauchlan is with us. Can you remind us again the titles of your 2 newest releases?
Yes. The one is called I Live on a White Cloud, and the other one is called The 1%.
The 1%. I Live on a White Cloud and 1%. Look for those by Murray McLauchlan. Murray, we got to wrap it up here now, but wow, thanks very much for the conversation. We could have gone on for a couple more hours, but maybe my 81 gigs of space would get used up. So thanks again for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Dennis. And I could have used up all your phone space, no problem. It's harder to shut me up than get me going.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, my pleasure. Take care. All right. Stay safe.
Looking out for number 1, that's what a lot of us have done. Some get bigger, others fall. Some get none, some take it all. Some people work hard every day to make sure that things stay that way. Most of the world behind the fence, looking in at the 1%. Bigger boat to keep the human race afloat. While some people paint the town, I think the ship is burning down. I could raise my fist and shout, but the cops might knock me out. I got to wonder if it's fair. Most of the world don't get their share. kids will find when it's their turn and it's their time. Trying to keep this world green, try not to get too old and mean. Must not panic, cut and run from the change that's gonna come.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.